The accounting happened first. Okafori's final report to the assembly was 17 pages long. It was not written in the language of grievance or accusation. It was written in the language of specifications and outcomes, the language Okafori spoke as naturally as breathing. It described, in precise and neutral terms, what the Velkarath coalition had done to Earth 10,000 years ago, cross-referenced against every verifiable record that humanity had kept, and then set those facts against what the campaign of the last 3 months had produced. The Draven had lost 41 ships. They had lost power generation capacity, equivalent to what ran 2 of their 6 star systems for 6 months. They had lost 7 communication hubs. They had lost, through the 3 coordinates exchange that Yael Morrow had forwarded as a counter-proposal, access to 3 key fuel processing facilities that would take an estimated 4 years to rebuild. They were not destroyed. Okafori had been asked, many times in the last 3 months, why not? Why not finish it? They had voted 376 to 11. Why not hold them to a standard equal to the one they had applied to humanity? Her answer was always the same. It was not mercy. It was math. A species that is destroyed makes no example. A species that has lost 41 ships and 4 years of fuel processing capacity, and knows exactly why, and knows that the species who did this to them went home afterward and turned their attention toward rebuilding. That species sits with what it has learned for a very long time, long enough for the lesson to travel, long enough for other species in this galaxy to look at the math and understand the new calculation. The Velkarath coalition had spent 6 months destroying Earth. Humanity had spent 3 months making a point. The point, written in Okafori's flat, precise language, was this: we know everything about you. We have always known. We took what we came for. We are done with you now. Do not make us come back. The assembly, which had been trying to mediate for 3 months, received the report and held sessions about it for 6 days. The Thresh, predictably, were the most thoughtful in their response. The Kari said very little. The Draven delegation to the assembly was reduced to 4 members after 2 of them quietly left without filing proper departure paperwork, a protocol violation that the assembly noted and did not pursue. Yael Morrow attended the final assembly session on the matter and said almost nothing. She sat in the human delegation section and she listened and she watched faces. When she was given the floor for closing remarks, she said 2 sentences. We appreciate the assembly's efforts toward resolution. We consider the matter concluded. She left before the applause-equivalent customs of the various species in the room had finished. Outside in the corridor, alone for the first time in what felt like weeks, she leaned her back against the wall and closed her eyes. She stood like that for exactly 63 seconds. She had counted. Then she opened her eyes. She straightened her jacket. She went to find a transport to Earth. The descent through the atmosphere was the part no one had been prepared for. They had prepared for it practically. There were protocols: the orbital approach, the atmospheric insertion angle, the heat shields, the specific landing site in the valley where the 16th Fleet's people had been working for 4 months. Ashvale had run the logistics himself, the way he always ran logistics, personally, precisely, without delegating the parts he thought were most likely to go wrong. None of that preparation touched what it was actually like. The ship entered the upper atmosphere and it shook. Not violently, but noticeably, the way ships don't shake in space. And the sound changed, because there was air now, air outside the hull, the first air any of them had moved through. The atmospheric composition readings on the screen said, breathable, altered from historical baseline. Not by much. 10,000 years had not done as much damage to the atmosphere as the bombardment had intended, because the atmosphere was large and deep, and the bombardment had been thorough but not infinite. Ashvale watched the descent screen, and he did not hold on to anything. He felt the gravity. Not ship gravity. They had always had ship gravity. The ship's systems maintained a constant field. But this was different, and he could feel the difference, though he could not have explained how. It was the gravity of a planet. It was the gravity that had pulled his species into shape over millions of years, and that they had been outside of for 10,000. It pulled the same. It felt like nothing different. He had expected it to feel different. It just felt like gravity. He did not know why that made his throat tighten. They sat down in the valley. The valley was approximately 12 kilometers long and 4 wide. nestled between geological formations that had sheltered it from the worst of the bombardment's long aftermath. The floor of the valley was gray-brown, rocky, covered in the fine ash-silicate mix that covered most of the planet's surface. Along the northern edge, where a persistent groundwater source had been confirmed by Wren's team, the green was. It was not lush. It was not what any of the image archives said a field of plants should look like. It was low and sparse and tough, dark green, almost gray-green, covering the rock in patches rather than a continuous layer. The plants were small. None of them rose more than knee-height. They were the result of thousands of years of slow reclamation, moving out from whatever ancient survivors had persisted underground, filling in where conditions allowed. They were alive. No one said anything when they came down the landing ramp. Ashvale came down first, which was not protocol. Protocol said the security sweep happened first, then the Admiral. He had told his security officer to stand down, and his security officer had correctly read his face and stood down. He walked down the ramp, and he stepped onto the surface of the planet, and he felt it. The soil was ash and rock, and the thing that ash and rock become over 10,000 years of wind and freeze and thaw and slow biological work. It gave slightly under his boot, just slightly, not the way the image descriptions had said, not that warm, rich give of deep soil. Something harder, something less forgiving, something that was what you get after what this planet had been through. He took 3 steps and stopped. He stood very still. The air was cold. It was early in the local morning, and the sun, the specific sun that had risen here every day for 4 billion years, was just above the eastern ridge of the valley, and the light it made was ordinary, yellow-white, the same color as any star of the same type, nothing special about it. He had been looking at stars through hull glass and display screens his whole life. He had never had one shine on his face before. He stood in it. The wind moved. It was real wind, not a ventilation system, not a temperature circulation fan, but the movement of air over a surface for no reason except that warm and cold met, and the physics of it made the air move. It was very quiet, the kind of quiet that does not happen inside a ship, where there is always the hum of engines and life support and 1,000 systems all working. The valley was quiet. No one else had come off the ramp yet. They were waiting. He had not told them to wait. They were simply waiting, in the way that people sometimes know to wait without being told. He walked toward the green. It was further than it looked. The green patches began about 200 meters from the landing site, at the base of the northern rock face where the groundwater seeped up through the rock. He walked across gray-brown ground, and the sound of his boots was different out here. He had never heard his own footsteps without the acoustic backdrop of a ship. They sounded too loud, too concrete, the sound of a person taking up actual space in an actual place. Dr. Lena Vare was there. She was crouching at the edge of the largest green patch, with a collection kit open beside her, doing what she had been doing for 4 months. She heard him coming, and she stood up, and she was very quiet for a moment. She was in her 50s, Dr. Vare. She had been on the 16th Fleet for 11 years. She had a round, tired face that looked like a person who had been having extremely large feelings in private for 4 months straight and was managing them by working constantly. She said, "They're responding well to the temperature support. We ran the projections. If conditions are maintained, if we do what the 16th has been doing, the heat generation support, at this rate, the green zone could triple in area within 50 years. 50 years, Ashvale said. That's the conservative estimate. She paused. There are several sites on other continents where we think similar microenvironments might have survived. Underground moisture, geological shelter. We haven't been to them yet. But if they're active, she stopped, looked at the plants. It could be much faster. In geological terms, it could all be much faster. He crouched down beside the plants. They were close up, not beautiful in the way pictures in old databases described plants being beautiful. They were gray-green and low, and their leaves were thick and waxy, the adaptation of something that had to conserve everything. They looked like they had worked very hard to be here. He thought they probably had. He put his hand out. He pressed his palm flat on the ground at the edge of the green, not on the plants themselves, but on the soil beside them. The mixed ash rock organic material that had been slowly becoming something over 10,000 years. It was cold, not frozen, just cold, the way the surface of a planet is cold in early morning, before the sun gets high enough to warm it. The ground had a texture against his palm that was not like anything he could compare it to, because he had nothing to compare it to, slightly rough, slightly giving, complex. The sun was on his back, warm through his jacket. He stayed there. Someone had followed him, several people, by the sound of the footsteps behind him, moving quietly. He did not turn around. He stayed crouched with his palm flat on the ground, and he stayed very still, and he let himself feel what he was feeling, which was not rage and was not triumph, and was not grief exactly, though it was something close to grief, in the sense that grief is what happens when the size of a thing becomes fully real to you for the first time. 10,000 years. Not his 10,000 years. No single person could carry 10,000 years. But the weight of it was in him, the inherited weight, the generational weight, the weight of every person who had carried the record and the ceremony, and the vial of ash, and the child named after a relative, who had never been born on a ship. All of it was in him the way your family is in you, not as memories you can access, but as something structural, something you are made of. His palm was flat on the ground of earth. He thought, I am the only person in history to have stood here and known what 10,000 years meant from the inside. He thought, there is no word for this. He thought about the vial of ash that Councilwoman Dreyer had placed on the table, and what it would mean to bring that ash here and let it go, let it fall back into the ground it had come from. He thought about Powell Suda. He thought about a woman named Amara Okafor with a container of soil samples she carried off a burning world. He stayed on the ground for a long time. When he stood, his palm was black. Ash, dark soil, whatever mixture of 10,000 years of accumulation this ground was made of. He looked at his hand. Someone behind him took out a recording device. He heard it, and he turned and shook his head slightly. The person lowered it. He did not wipe his hand off. He held it at his side, palm out, and he turned and looked at what was behind him. They had all come off the ships. Not just the crew of his own vessel, the people from the 16th Fleet's ships, the people from the other fleet elements that had entered orbit in the last 24 hours. Hundreds of people, standing on the valley floor, spread out across the gray-brown ground, not arranged in any order, not in formation, just people standing on a surface under a sky. Some of them were crouching like he had crouched, touching the ground with their hands. Some of them were standing very still with their faces up, looking at the sun. Some of them were crying. Some of them were not crying, but their faces were doing something that had no name. Some of them had walked to the edge of the green zone and were standing looking at the plants with the same expression people use when they are looking at something they have known about their entire lives but never seen before. That expression sits somewhere between recognition and shock. The face of a person seeing something they always knew was true, finally being true in front of them. No one was speaking. Ashvale stood and looked at them, at hundreds of human beings standing on the planet that was their origin, and their loss, and the thing they had been moving toward for longer than any of them could hold in their minds. And he had the thought that he would have again many times in the days and months and years that came after this. We made it. Not triumphant, not celebrating, just factual, true, the same tone he used for tactical reports and logistics assessments. We made it. The assembly formally acknowledged the situation 2 weeks later. They did not call it a return, they called it a reoccupation of historically significant territory, and passed a resolution of recognition that used 14 carefully worded paragraphs to say what could have been said in one sentence. Yael Morrow received the resolution and sent a one-line acknowledgement and did not read it again. The Thresh sent a separate communication, not through the assembly, directly to the human delegation. It was one paragraph. It said, "We hope what you found is what you needed it to be." It was not signed by Voshan. It was signed by an aide, whose name Yael did not recognize. She found out later that the aide had been born on the Thresh homeworld, in a city that had been rebuilt 4 times over 4,000 years, and had grown up hearing about the coalition as history, rather than living memory. She thought about what it meant to carry history rather than memory. She thought about the difference between those two things. She thought maybe it was not as large a difference as she had always assumed. She kept the communication. She did not reply to it yet. It was the kind of communication that deserved a reply that she was not ready to write. Commander Okafori arrived 2 days after Ashvale. She came down alone. She did not tell anyone she was going to the valley. She took a small shuttle, flew it herself, landed it at the secondary site that Wren's team had established at the east end. She walked to the green zone. She stood at the edge of it for a long time. Then she sat down, not dramatically, just sat down on the ground, cross-legged, in front of the nearest cluster of plants, and she looked at them. She took off her jacket because the sun was warmer now, later in the day, and she pushed up the sleeve on her left arm. She held her wrist with the tattoo over the soil, not touching it, just held it close, the name facing down toward the ground. She stayed like that for a while. Then, she put her sleeve back down and her jacket back on, and she stood up, and she walked around the edge of the green zone, following it, learning its shape, the way it spread and thinned, and came back thicker in some places than others. She thought about soil samples, about a woman who would not leave without them. She thought, "You brought some of this back with you. Some of what you carried is here." She thought, "And now so are we." Ashvale returned to the landing site in the late afternoon. The sky was doing something he had never seen. The sun was going down, and the light was changing through colors that he had read about but never experienced. The description said orange. The description said gold. They were not wrong, but they were not sufficient either. They described the color but not the quality of it, the way it moved differently from the artificial lights he had grown up under, the way it seemed to come from an angle rather than from everywhere at once, the way the shadows it made were long and distinct. He sat on a rock at the edge of the landing site and he watched the sun go down. He thought about the report he needed to file, about the sequence of events that would need to happen now, the longer-term planning, the decisions about how the fleets organized around the planet, what the rebuilding looked like, what the relationship with the assembly looked like going forward, the 1,000 practical questions of what it meant to be a species returning to a home that had been destroyed and was slowly coming back. He thought about all of that. Then he let himself stop thinking about it and just watched the sun go down. The ash on his palm had dried. It was still there. He had not washed it off. He would wash it off eventually, but not yet. He looked at it. He thought about 10,000 years of people who had never done this, never sat on a rock on this planet and watched this sun go down. The people who had carried the record, the ceremony, the ash. The people who had built the ships and rebuilt the ships and rebuilt them again. The people who had run the survey for 400 years. The people who had named their children after relatives who had never stood on soil. The people who had died on the journey, of illness, of age, of the 1,000 ordinary ways that people die when they live entire lives inside ships, without seeing this. He thought about Powell Suda specifically, and he thought, "I am sorry you are not here. I am sitting on a rock watching the sun go down, and I am sorry you are not here to see it." The sun went below the ridge. The colors changed, deepening. The first stars appeared. He had seen stars his whole life, through hull glass, on display screens, close and detailed and mapped to the fraction of a degree. He knew the sky above this planet by chart. He had studied it. He had never seen stars from below before. They looked exactly the same. They looked completely different. He sat on the rock and he looked up at them, his face up, the cold evening air moving against his skin, and he felt, in some very quiet part of himself, the thing that he had not allowed himself to feel for months and years, and in some sense his entire life. Not peace, not resolution, not an end. Something more like the thing that comes when you have been holding your breath for a very long time and you finally, carefully, let it out. He breathed. The air tasted of ash and cold and the mineral smell of rock and something else. Something organic, faint, barely there. That was the green zone, and the plants, and the 10,000 years of slow work that had made them possible. He breathed it in. Below the ridge, fully gone now, the sun was setting on a planet that had burned and been dark for a very long time. The stars came out. The ash stayed on his hand. The green things grew. None of this resolved the other. All of it was true at the same time. He stayed until it was dark, and then he stayed a little longer, and then he got up and walked back to the ship. There was a great deal of work left to do. He was not finished. But he had been here, and he had felt it, and he had let the sun shine on his face, and his palm was black with the ground of earth. And no matter what came next, the long rebuilding, the assembly negotiations, the question of what species that have been away for 10,000 years become when they return. No matter what came next, this was real, and it had happened, and it was now part of the record. They had come back. After 10,000 years. After everything. They had come back. And the planet, slowly, impossibly, stubbornly, was coming back too.